welcome everyone. It's very good to see you all, and welcome at the Humanity Hub here where we are, and welcome to our very first Making the Case event of Cultural Emergency Response. My name is Sanne Letchert. I'm director of Cultural Emergency Response, and I'm actually very happy to welcome you here tonight, especially because it's almost exactly 1 year after we launched as an independent organization last year in the Peace Palace here in The Hague. And it's been a year in which a lot has happened, because at SER we have the protection of culture in crisis at the very heart of what we do. And we work together with local partners to provide first aid to cultural heritage under threat in conflict and disaster situations. And this year, I think we had to mobilize more than ever before, not only during the ongoing war in Ukraine, but also in Turkey after the earthquakes, and now also more recently in Morocco and Libya. And besides the tremendous humanitarian impact, of course, of these events, it's also the cultural continuity of the people and the communities affected that is vulnerable, that it's at risk, and that can use support in being protected. So that's why I'm really grateful to have this conversation here today at the Humanity Hub, and that they're providing us a platform to have this here, so that we can start a conversation about why it is so important, actually, that cultural heritage protected in crisis situations. Like, what does it mean for people, and what can it do for them also in a crisis situation? So we hope to start finding the answers to these questions today in this conversation, where we are going to observe cultural heritage, as a humanitarian issue. And luckily, I'm not alone in this conversation. I have 3 fantastic panelists with me today. And before we dive into the conversation, I think it's nice if I introduce them to you briefly. So here on my right, I have Tamar Sopromadze. She's an art historian and a heritage expert, and project coordinator at the National Committee of Blue Shields in Georgia. And she's actually a project coordinator of the very first pilot project of our Making the Case program, that was the incentive of having this conversation. And we will see some of the films that are a result of this project, and we'll hear a lot more about that in a bit. So Tamar, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Then we also have Marek Schiegel. I hope I'm saying that right. I practice on the phone. He's with us today on his personal title as a humanitarian expert, and also in crisis management and conflict resolution. And he's currently working at the director of the OSCE High Commissioner of National Minorities. And you have actually an extensive experience, and have worked with the communities in Georgia yourself. So thank you for joining us. And then last but not least, Thea Hilhorst. Orlies. She's a professor of humanitarian studies at the International Institute for Social Studies of the Erasmus University in The Hague, focusing mostly on aid-society relations, and you have a special interest, you say, in the intersection of humanitarianism with the development sector, peace building, and gender relations. So welcome to the 3 of you, and thanks for joining us here today. Before we start the conversation, I'll do a little bit of structure so you know what to expect. Because central to this event is actually the screening of 3 films that are the result of a project we have supported together with Tamar and her colleagues at Blue Shields Georgia. And they're the result of the project that aimed at preserving the intangible heritage of displaced communities from the occupied regions. So we'll have the conversation in 3 sections. Screening of the film, we'll introduce each one of them, and then after about an hour or so, we'll have some time to answer some questions from the audience. So with that, Tamar, I'll come to you first to ask you if you can share a little bit more about the project that you did. Tell us what it was about, what you did, and mostly what your findings and observations were.
For those of you who don't know, Blue Shield basically deals with protection of cultural heritage in times of crises. And our organization has been active in Georgia for the past 10 years, and we've had a lot of experience of working with museums, different organizations, but mainly focusing on movable and immovable heritage, so like field heritage and museum artifacts, etc. So this was our first experience of working with intangible heritage, which is just basically all types of heritage that you cannot really touch. These are traditions, our beliefs, all that. So it was our first steps, and the idea came from our local partner, who is an IDP in Georgia. And it was his passion project to do this research, and we tried to help him as much as possible. And he was a great asset because he's a part of the community. So he gave us unique insight into the community, and we had some, respect due to him, because as an outsider, it's hard to get that information from different communities you're not part of. So apart from that, it was great to have our U.S. colleagues by our side from Penn Cultural Heritage Center, who had so much more experience with working with intangible heritage, but also with SIR, because it was also their first time on working on this topic. And I remember very early on, we had some Zoom meetings trying to figure out how to work with this in this field together, so it would work for both sides. So it's a very it's difficult subject because it's, once again, it's a heritage you cannot really touch. So I think it came out to be really good, and you're going to see some results in the films. So what we did in our project, our mission was to help preserve the intangible heritage of the IDP community. That's by documenting this heritage. So we did door-to-door interviews with the IDPs. We created an ethnographic questionnaire, and interviewers who were also from local community went door to door, and they recorded interviews, transcribed them, and in the end, we created field research based on all this, and with all the elements of cultural heritage that came up. We had focus group meetings with IDPs in different settlements, and we tried to create a space where they could speak freely about their heritage and about because all these people have also been through a lot. So we tried to, and the heritage is the thing that unites us all. So we tried to create a safe space for them. Before we talk about the results of the project, I want to give you a little context. So Georgia, as I'm sure most of you know, located in Eastern Europe. In 2008, there was a war between Georgia and Russia, and Russian forces occupied the historic Tkhin Valley region in 2008, and until today it remains occupied. So around 130,000 people, ethnic Georgians, had to flee their homes in 2008, and they remain IDPs to this day. They didn't think this would be a permanent situation. They really thought it was very temporary. So a lot of people talk about leaving their pets behind and not even remembering if they closed the doors and locked the windows or not. So for them, it was a very, very big shock. Today, they live in IDP settlements, basically scattered around eastern Georgia. And the thing is, they're not even... so people from one village are scattered in different settlements. So their the people who were next door neighbors don't live next to each other now. So it's very difficult for them. So, and apart from this, around 5 years after the war, in 2013-14, all of the villages that were villages of ethnically Georgian people were completely destroyed. So all the houses were completely destroyed. all of their inner roads. So there's nothing left of these villages except for churches that are obviously abandoned because there's no one there. So it's very rough for these people. They lost their homes, the physical homes. They lost their chance of going back, and they don't even have that connection with each other anymore because they live separate from each other. So we tried to take this all into account and just try our best to document their memories of their lives back home. And it's a very unique experience because these people, we took the population of one specific village. And this is the people who tied their identity very, very tightly to their village and to their cultural heritage. It's inseparable for them. Like their lives and tangible heritage is all one, and their lives were like ruled by their calendar, and they all lived by these rules. Like everyone knew that when Easter comes, the whole village gathers in the churchyard and they light this big fire, and everyone has this feast. And this was just their lives, and it was it's very organic for them. And it all got like completely interrupted after the war. We tried to at least document everything that they remember that's very, very fresh in their memory. They're very proud of their heritage, of their village, of their homeland. We tried to document as much as possible, and maybe also try to encourage them, because by showing our interests and by showing that we think they know this is all valuable because they are very proud of it, but by showing that we are also interested in it as an outsider, they also, I think they felt more encouraged, and there are some stories that I can tell later about that. We did all these interviews and meetings, and as a result of interviews, we asked our interviewers, maybe pick out some people that you find the most interesting, that maybe we can do something with them. And we decided to do the short films with them, demonstrate each focusing on one intangible heritage element, so one tradition. And it's very specific to this region, to these people, and they were very lovely, and they were very willing to visited them in their homes, and they were all very sweet. And I'm very, very excited that you guys get to see them too, because even for me, I'm obviously Georgian, but I'm not from this region. And even for me, it's like something sweet. It's very for them, it's inseparable from their lives, but for me, it's something alien. But I'm also very excited to share it with like international people and see what you guys think. And these are very, very sweet people, and I hope you enjoy looking at them as much as we did working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. Because they're really popular in Georgia, right? The films, they have a lot of success.
We shared them on. We shared them on our social media channels, and I made sure to share them because these people, I told you, very, very love their region, love their cities, their villages. So they have like these Facebook groups for each village where they still communicate with each other and try to stay in touch. So I made sure to post these videos in all these small groups, and they all know each other, they're all related to each other, and they loved it. They loved seeing people they haven't seen in a long time in the video, and for them it's also like, oh, it's my neighbor, but they're like filming it, so this must be something important for someone else too. So I think that's also like empowering to them, and they've been quite successful.
Great, thank you. Well, maybe we should start watching the first one, which is called Angel's Day.
აი ახლა მე ამჟამად ვაკეთებ ქათმის ხუთშაბათის ტრადიციას. ვაპირებ ქათამი მოხარშო და როგორც ვაკეთებდით სოფელში, ისე გავაკეთოთ დღესაც. იკულებოდა ქათამი ყველა ოჯახში, ვიდრე დაიწყებოდა დიდ მარხვა. ნამდვილი ღვინო ზედა შეზღვინოს ვეძახდით. ღვინოს უსმელ წყალს ოჯახს წყლის ძალაც ჰქონდეს. ძლიერი იყოს ოჯახი. კვერცხი, ქადა, მოხეული ქადა, გნებავთ ქონის იყო, გნებავთ ერბოსი იყო, ვისაც როგორ. აი, ასეთი სახის პატარა ყურებს ვაკეთებდით. ასეთი სახის 3 ძალი უნდა იყოს ეს. ესეც ინდივიდუალურია, ვისაც როგორ უნდა და რამდენი უნდა და, მაგრამ ჩვენ სამ-სამს ვაკეთებთ. ეს შიგთავსია და აი უკვე გარედან რომ უნდა გავუკეთოთ. ის უკვე სქელი ვის უნდა იყოს მასა. ეხლა ამით უნდა გავუკეთოთ მოხეული ქადა. ნიფსიანი ბებო. ასე. არა ბებო, არა მოსვით. აი, მომეხმარე მარიხნა შენ. აი, ასე დავახვიოთ. შენ საპირისპირო მხარეზე გადმომტრიალე. აქეთ, მიაქეთ. ისე ფრთხილად რა გაჩვენე. აი, ასე. ეხლა ვიწყებთ მოხებას. ამიცი? ეხლა დაველოდოთ ბებო. ახარება მშვიდობა და მალე ბებო იქ გავაკეთებინოს ჩვენ სახლებში. დაუბრუნებული ყავთ ჩვენს ადგილებზე, ჩვენს მამაყაფებულ ფუძეზე. ამ ყველაფერს შევალაგებდი მოხაშულ ქათამთან ერთად კარადაში. დავანთებდით სანთელს, გავაკეთებდით ნიგზებისგან ბაზმას. ასე გადაჯვარედინებულს დავაწყობდით პატარა თეფშზე, დავანთებდით, მივართმევდით ანგელოზებს. აი, ასეთია ჩვენი ანგელოზობისთვის მისართმევი, აქვია დასახელი დაბლათურ ანგელოზს მივართ ტრადიციულად, ხო. იცით რა იყო კიდევ, ეხლა ჩვენს ოჯახს ეგ ტრადიცია არ ჰქონდა. სტუმარი მოგვივიდოდა, თუ შეგვესწრებოდა ვინმე, აუცილებლად უნდა სტუმარსაც მიერთმია და ჩვენც უნდა მიგვერთმია. მაგრამ იყო ოჯახები, სადაც მკაცრად იყო დაცული, უცხო ადამიანს არაფრით, ის ვინც ოჯახის წევრი არ იყო, არაფრით არ მიახსნებდნენ, არ მიიწვევდნენ მაგიდასთან. ბავშვებო მეთქვენ, უნდა მოგერთოთ ეხლა საანგელოზო ქართლის ხორცს. კიდე როგორ გარკვეულ შეიძლება, ყველა ოჯახის წევრი ხონდა მიირთვას. ძალიან გემრიელია, გაიზრდებით დიდები, ჯანმრთელები და თქვენი ანგელოზი, მფარველი ანგელოზი ყოველთვის თქვენ გვერდით იქნება და გიმფარველებ.
We really see the lady in the video speaking of her home actually and her connection to her homeland. She says, "And my homeland, the land of the ancestors," and also the importance of the opportunity to giving it to the next generation. You see the young kids trying to help, and now later when you grow up, you have to do the same tradition. So that's wish for continuity is really clear in this. And That's actually my first question, I think, to you is about, and I'm curious what you think about that as well. Like, what is the importance of this project to them, or their culture, especially within this crisis situation and the fact that they've been displaced? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think it's very, very fragile, and it's becomes very clear after the conflict. The intangible heritage, especially because we all carried within ourselves. And of course, the trauma is a big issue here, but also being separated from your people in your homeland. And yeah, that's a big yeah, that's why it's important to carry out the projects like this, because it's helping it's helping us to understand these people more and respect their traditions, and maybe also like these children, it was the first time for them witnessing this tradition, because it's Angel's Day, so Angel is connected to the home. So this lady in the video didn't really feel like she was home after the displacement. So she doesn't really feel like this is her real home now. So she wasn't inclined to continue this tradition, because she's like, oh, when I get back home, then I'm gonna pray to my angel that's connected to my house. So it's important, I think, to also let these people know that what their practices and their beliefs are very important, and if they are important for their children, grandchildren too, because you can see like they were fascinated with this, and they said like, oh yeah, next year because we obviously visited them not on this day, and they were like, oh, on the day when it actually happens, let's do this again. And yeah, we're hopeful that this helps a little, but at least documenting it helps somehow to at least spread information about it and let people know how valuable these people's culture is, that is being affected so much by the conflict and displacement.
Yeah, and it even sounds like making the very video of it helped reviving a tradition in a way. So that's also a beautiful side effect, I think.
Yeah,
of
I hope so.
Yeah, thank you.
And Mayek, you worked in Georgia for quite a while as well. Have you seen similar dynamics, or how do you see that the role of culture of people's culture in a crisis situation?
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, indeed, I spent 3 years in Georgia as the head of EU monitoring mission there. For those of you who are not familiar maybe with this organization, this is one of the biggest civilian CSDP operations dealing with monitoring the post-conflict situation after 2008 war along the dividing lines, what is called in the political jargon administrative boundary lines between territories controlled by breakaway authorities in Skin Valley and Sukhumi, and the territory controlled by the central government of Georgia. So this is, let's say, post-conflict operation, but this conflict is not over. So this conflict is very much alive, but is evolving and with different phases, with different stages, and unfortunately not significant progress inside in resolving this conflict. So yes, I spent 3 years trying to contribute to stabilization on the ground, mainly through constant monitoring of the situation, trying to prevent potential incidents, but also in particular monitoring the situation of conflict-affected communities on both sides of this dividing line, and the situation of internally displaced persons, again in this international terminology called IDPs, is of particular relevance here. in order to understand the scale of this displacement. So you have to understand that in the country, having right now 3.4 million people, you have almost 300 people who are displaced as the result of a number of conflicts that erupted in Georgia at the beginning of 90s first, and then with the recent phase in 2008. And those people, they were forced to leave their homes in a very violent way, usually. They lost everything, and now we see already second generation of those internally displaced people living in the camps with slightly maybe better conditions today than let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But we just let's say mark the 15th anniversary of the 2008 conflict. It was in August 2008, and as Tamar said, the memory of those people is very much still collective memory, still linked with those tragic moments of August 2008. And to add maybe to this picture, it is important to understand that for centuries, those ethnic groups, Ossetians, Abkhaz, Georgians, were living together in a relatively peaceful coexistence. So this is the work of the institution that I work right now for, namely prevention of inter-ethnic conflicts. And it was very vibrant multicultural society in Georgia. It still is, but with those internal local conflicts instigated by some external forces, unfortunately, right now the problem, the situation that we face in Georgia is very sharp, clear division between those societies and very limited interactions. So the problem is I think, becoming even more pertinent. It's not disappearing, because the chances of reintegration of those communities after so many years of separation and certain grievances, also inter-ethnic tensions, mainly, let's be frank, initiated or promoted by the politicians, are very strong. So it would require really gigantic Herculean work to bring those communities back to the situation before the conflict. So I'm not an expert on cultural heritage. I can say that with some modesty that I have quite substantial experience as practitioner in crisis management, conflict prevention, conflict resolution, peace building. And I think that the role of cultural heritage here can be seen throughout entire what is called conflict cycle, usually. So both in the phase of prevention of conflicts, then in the phase of resolution of already existing conflicts, if the prevention been unsuccessful, unfortunately, and then as the factor in post-conflict stabilization, rehabilitation, and development. So here I think more and more international structures, organizations, they recognize the importance of both tangible and intangible cultural heritage as the important element, factor of dealing with conflicts, not only local conflicts but also interstate conflicts. And unfortunately, Russian aggression against Ukraine, with all the tragic consequences that we see on a daily basis, is a painful reminder that those interstate conflicts, conventional conflicts that bring such human suffering are not related to the past. So they are happening in the middle of Europe, actually. This war also brought back to the attention certain aspects of cultural heritage as the, to certain extent, instrument relevant for the conflict, but also the necessity to protect this cultural heritage in such situations. So maybe I will come back later to the specific situation in Georgia if the time permits.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think before continuing the conversation, it's nice to watch the second film, which is called Fishing.
Saldi questo ti giochi nes. Ai, quelli giochi qua. E ci ne scavi, squilli giù. E papala okte ti vas roida. Egi. Servo. Aku ko dai kheta ke. Asti choita kita orte zaobne anaira. Donk asti choit rai. Ai naga thavi choit. Thavi დასაგები. ძელ ძუაზე დიდი წყია, ქვა დიდი წყია სად იყო? დიდი ქვა მოვაბავდით. შავაგდებით, ავასხავით 10. 15 ნესკავზე და მთელი აქვს გადავკეტავით ხოლმე იმ დასაგებით. მე ამოვიღებდით დაახლოებით 5-6 წელი ვედიყო. თუ ღამე დატოვდი და დილით გადავხვიდოდი, ლათ უკეთეს. ყველა ნესკავზე თითქმის თევზიები. კეხში ერთი დინარი ჩამოდიოდა, კეხურას ეძახდნენ. ორი მთიდან გამოდიოდა, ერთზე ეძახდნენ ასბათის წყალს ეძახდნენ. მეორეს ეძახდნენ იმას დედოფალას. დედოფალა და ის ერთმანეთს უერთდებოდა, უკვე კეხურას ეძახდნენ, უკვე სოფელში ჩამოდიოდა. იქაც იყო დიდძალი თევზი. მაგარით ეს ვიჭერით ხოლმე იქაც. თევზი მოძებდა. ეს წელიწად ისეთი რამე გააკეთეს იქა, რომ ჩაყარეს რა, შხამი გაუხეს. აი ქლორს ეძახი. ვერ მოასწრეს მერე მან და დაჭერა, რომ სოფელმა გაიგოს, თუნი დადგა, სოფელში ჩამოდის ეს წყალი და გაიქცნენ ისინი და მე აბა ის ხალხი ვედრებით აზიდავდა თევზს. 8 წელიწად იქა თევზი აღარ გვინახია. მე შემოვიდა თანდათან ნენელა შემოვიდა თევზი, რომ გაიწმინდა ეს წყალი. შემოვიდა.
Yeah, so what's striking for me in this film is that it's almost nostalgic, right? It's really about memory and how much a certain tradition has been connected to a place, and that traditional way of fishing was found because of that specific place at that river, and that connection is lost. But for me, it also speaks a little bit about like resilience and the wish to wanting to continue those practices. So maybe, Mike, you just said, okay, reflect on the Georgian community specifically, and I'm curious to know, you know, if you've seen his resilience by means of cultural practices more in your time there. And then maybe Thea, after you can reflect from this a little on this with the humanitarian perspective and the role of well-being and resilience and trauma processing.
Yes, thank you. This is very interesting illustration also of the let's say common space in which two communities used to live. This Liachvi River that is mentioned here runs from the territory that is now proclaimed as South Ossetia, this separatist territory, runs south, reaching the territory controlled by the central Georgian government, and then into the Kura River, yes, so the main river in Georgia, which is also having kind of symbolic value. And in many places where we see this dividing line of South Ossetia, you have many examples actually of historical monuments that used to represent shared heritage. So unfortunately, that tendency, and it is deliberately promoted by the breakaway authorities in Shin Valley, the tendency to eradicate the traces of this common cultural heritage. It is being done through different means under the pretext of rehabilitation of some churches. The typical elements of Georgian architecture are erased through the, for example, change of the profile of the exhibition in the one of the most important museums in Akhalgori region, which is the eastern part of South Ossetia, traditionally populated by ethnic Georgians, with a very important aristocratic castle in Akhalgori that is hosting the regional museum. And in last couple of years, the objects, the artifacts in this museum has been gradually replaced in order to change also the kind of general message of this collection. There is also problem, something that we tried to tackle as EUMM, head of EUMM. So it was my also duty is the co-chair of one of the crisis management instruments. This is called Incident Prevention and Response Mechanism that brings together Georgian side, South Ossetian side, and Russian side. And this instrument is kind of mediation instrument that is trying to prevent the eruption of conflicts and is trying to resolve important issues, especially for the local population affected by the conflict. So on many occasions we had to deal with the problems related to the access of churches that used to be important for the communities on both sides of the dividing line, to the graveyards, especially, you know, in Georgian tradition in Caucasus, you know, the ancestors' graveyards have very special role. So there's tradition to visit graveyards during the Orthodox Easter holidays. So we tried to negotiate actually some level of access during this week of holidays with mixed results, some level of success, I would say. And then also something that is more related to the intangible heritage, namely some traditions or festivals. I would like to mention, Tamar knows this, I'm sure, Lomisoba, festival. Lomisi Monastery is one of the oldest monasteries in Georgia, with very important religious value for local residents. And it is located exactly very high up, above 2,000 meters above the sea level, exactly almost on the dividing line. And this is the festival that traditionally takes place in June, and is related with the Saint George, the patron of Georgia, and used to bring together people from both sides of this valley, thousands of people. But today, actually, the positions of the Russian troops are located 200 meters from the entrance to the monastery. So every year we used to establish contacts with the local Russian commander, asking him actually to allow pilgrims to reach the monastery. And also on number of occasions it was the issue of security of the monks, of the pilgrims, because of the potential of some incidents. So in order to preserve this very important tradition, it is sometimes necessary to use traditional crisis management and let's say conflict management instruments, including the presence of international actors on the ground.
Yeah, so actually a very crucial role of culture and ensuring its continuity in that specific situation. Thank you. Thea, you want to reflect?
Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Thea Hilhorst. I'm a professor of humanitarian studies. So, but you asked me now to reflect on this part, the well-being.
Yes, exactly. If you could,
resilience, and what can I say? It looks so insignificant, isn't it? Just knowing how to bake a certain pie, or making a film of it of 5 minutes, and yet it's so important, and yet it's so can make such a difference. And of course, culture, the sense of belonging, the sense of being who you are, your sense of identity is very strongly linked to those small things, the small everyday gestures, the songs of your youth. We all have that, the smells that come back when we smell something particular from when we were a child. To lose that is it's incredibly big, and people will hold on to whatever small tokens of culture or ritual they have to keep with. And you've said it now 3 times, I think, the sense of continuity, the sense of continuing to be. There's one example I might give from an entirely different part of the world, which is in West Africa, where Paul Richards, an anthropologist, noticed that at times of real food shortage, so there's nothing to eat, really, people are really hungry, they nonetheless cook. But what they cook are stones, inedible stones, of course. So, but it's the motion of making the fire, putting the pot on the fire, letting the water boil, waiting for some time, getting together, gathering around the fire to eat. And that is what people also need, the ritual of the everydayness in those type of very dire circumstances. So they cook, but they cook stones, of course. They will not eat the stones, but it's how you pattern your days. It's how you get on. And that is equally important as, of course, filling your stomach at some point. So they just keep going. It's a cultural ritual, cooking the stones.
Yeah.
So that is also how important it is. It's where, even though it's at the side of it, it's very small, ridiculous almost. But it might be the difference between survival and non-survival, isn't it? Because I'm also reminded of Hannah Arendt, who said that in times of real crisis, it's it's not the big ideas that get people through. It's the smallness of life. It's the keeping alive the small embers of what used to exist, and sort of
Yeah.
Throwing some oxygen at it to just make it into really small flames, waiting for better days. And that is inevitably connected here because it is the waiting for better days, holding on to a sense of community. I hope there will be better days, but at least it helps you today.
Yeah.
And what I really like as well about your story is the role of Facebook. How nowadays communities can also grow in different ways, isn't it? And I can just see how a short film like yours, the 5 minutes, how it travels around and how it brings a smile to people's faces when they see it, and they can almost imagine the smell of the chicken and the bread.
Yeah.
And have their memories, even if it's only for then and there that they have that smile on their face. It's already quite something, and it's maybe the only thing you can do. Even though it's very sad to hear all the stories that you're talking about, the loss of culture, the loss of the deliberate destruction of culture. In the face of that, to just keep going.
Mm.
And it's what people can do and what people do. But that's really quite amazing. And it's the rituals of life that take him through. Not only these rituals, but also the simple rituals of no matter what happens, young people will fall in love. No matter what happens, they will make babies. And somehow that's also how community is created and recreated with those rituals that come with it. So it's very touching.
Yeah.
What more can I say?
Yeah,
It's
that's
touching.
beautiful to say.
Yeah.
I don't want you to say anything else. No, you're actually speaking about something to hold on to and hope, actually. And yeah, I think that I recognize that in stories of a lot of partners that we work with, that's maybe the most important thing of projects that we do. So thank you for putting it so nicely. So maybe the last film of tonight, which is called Beer.
კარგად უნდა დაწვა პური. კარგად. და ეს დამწვარი პური ერთი ღამით უნდა გააჩერო ცივ წყალში. თუნდაც იმ რაოდენობის წყალი დაასხა, რამდენსაც ფიქრობ, რომ ლუდი გჭირდება. ერთი ღამის შემდეგ დილით ამ დამბალ დამწვარ პურს თუშფალანგზე გადმოიღებ და დაწურავ კარგად. გადმოიღებ მეორე ქვაფში, გააწურნოს გასუფთავებულს, ჩადებ და დაუმატებ შაქარს და სვიას. კარგახანი უნდა ადუღო, რომ რაღაცა დაიკლოს, აი ესე ბადაგვი რომ მოგვიდუღებია და რომ უნდა იმას გარკვეული დრო დუღილისა, ასე უნდა ამ ლუდსაც. გადმოდგავ, გააგრილებ, უნდა იყოს აუცილებლად ამ სვიის მარცვლები და ფირფიტები როა აუცილებლად უნდა იყოს შიგა, ის რომ ამას თავისი გემო და არომატი გქონდეს და გაანელებ გარეთ და ამ განელებულში საფუარს უზავ. ეს შენი ვითია რა, როგორც გინდა იმდეს უზავ, როგორც გეჩქარება, იმის მიხედვით უნდა ამ საფუარის დოზა. ეხლა დადებ ისეთ ადგილზე, შენ რა დროსაც გჭირდება. თუ გინდა, აი, თუ მოგვიანებით გჭირდება, შეინახავ ცოტა გრილ ადგილზე და თუ სწრაფად გჭირდება, თბილ ადგილზე უნდა დადო, რომ ამ საფუარმა მოქმედება არ შეწყვიტოს. რა ვიცი, კარგი იყო სახლში მაინც სულ სხვა ხალისი ჰქონდა ამ ყველაფერს და რა ვიცი, სულ სხვანაირად ხდებოდა ხოლმე აი მოლოდინი დღეობისა სულ სხვანაირად. აქ როცა მოდის 20 მაისი, აქ გული მწყდება ხოლმე, უფრო ვიდრე მიხარია.
So maybe the last bit of this conversation, I want to talk a little bit about the relation between the cultural sector and the humanitarian sector, because we as a cultural emergency organization, we're of course trying to work as many stakeholders as we can to support our partners on the ground effectively. The humanitarian sector is a very important element in that, because we want to, of course, react as quickly as possible. We operate in crisis situations. So if I can ask maybe, Thea, how do you see the relationship or the synergies between the two, and what are the opportunities to work together?
Well, the opportunities definitely yes. The synergies not so much yet. And because it's a bit separate worlds, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's very typical how you and I know each other. There was only, I think, one person in the Netherlands who really consistently tried to show the links between cultural heritage and humanitarianism. That's René Teigeler, who unfortunately died and this year. But somehow he found it so important as his last mission that literally, I think 2 days before he died, he introduced us to each other.
Yeah.
And gave us a kind of mission statement, like we should continue to write his paper, finish the paper that he wrote about this issue. So that's why it's also for me personally quite special to be here tonight, because it feels like fulfilling his mission a little bit by doing what he asked us, namely to connect better the cultural heritage sector with humanitarianism. Now, it's not a humanitarianism and culture. Humanitarianism, of course, we associate with life-saving activities in the face of disaster and conflict. Well, it's much broader than that, and especially over the last decades. I'm sitting very much with my back to all of you. Especially in the last decades, there has been a sort of, you could say, an expansion of humanitarian action, in the sense that there's a realization that disaster and conflict don't come out of nothing. They don't appear just like that, and they're not going to last very shortly. So this idea of a crisis situation where you can just intervene and then walk out again has sort of gone from. And especially now with climate change, we see that crises are long-term crises. And for that reason, there's less and less rationale in separating out the domain of life-saving immediate action from humanitarian side from the more long durée type of actions in relation to development and, for example, cultural heritage and peace building, which is all, of course, deeply connected, as you also say, Marek. Is that the reality? How far are we going here? It's very difficult, because humanitarians, especially in the face of immediate crisis, like a big disaster, their priority will always be with life-saving, immediate life-saving. And one of the, I think, what we now also see with the realization that crisis is taking longer, we see new actors on the scene, relatively new actors on the scene. For example, increasingly we see that the World Bank takes a role in immediate crisis, but also UNESCO is increasingly active in those places. So to some extent, it's not so much. Well, there is a deep connection between cultural heritage and humanitarian crisis, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's also the job of humanitarian action or humanitarian organizations to do that job. To a large extent, I think it's extremely important UNESCO becomes more active in those kind of situations, and other agencies like your own. So that is one part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
That we used to think that humanitarian crisis, there's only humanitarian actors there. Like other than that, there's nobody. But increasingly, we see that development actors are coming to those places. Also because the SDGs are so much in danger, especially in those places.
Yeah.
So we see now World Bank, UNDP, all those agencies also looking like, what can we do in those areas to maintain momentum? Now, what I further find very, very important, and that's also one of the things that René has brought out very strongly in his paper, is there is in humanitarian action one large overlapping task, which is important, and that is that humanitarian actors have this sort of motto. I don't know how to call it. It's not a motto. To do no harm. So where they work, they shouldn't, even if they cannot solve issues entirely, they should definitely not make it worse. Now, there's a long thinking behind this do no harm, and it started in the 1990s when, if you're not careful as humanitarian actors, you actually do harm. For example, you can make the conflict worse. Even in a very small way. Research we did in Afghanistan, one of my colleagues did research in Afghanistan on disaster risk reduction, a very disaster-prone country. And in the smallest manners, like the smallness of life that we're talking about today, if you have a very tiny wall to stop the water from coming to the village, a flood prevention measure, it so much matters on whose land is that wall, who is allowed to build or not. Because the people who construct the wall, they get a little bit of money. If these people are all drawn from the same ethnic community, the others will be angry. So even building the tiniest of little walls against the flood can create, at that very local level, dispute, conflict. So the adage of do no harm is really for a constant reminder for humanitarians to know what is going on, to be aware of the conditions, to be aware of the dynamics of conflict, to be aware of the dynamics of erosion happening in the area, to make sure that whatever they do is conscious of that and at least not doing more harm. So in that sense, there are many synergies.
Yeah.
And for example, in one of the things that I was rereading the paper by René for tonight to prepare, in the field of early warning system, you can make things separate. You can have, the separate early warning for this, for that, for the other, but you can also actually incorporate and integrate some of your early warning systems to take into account possible damage to heritage and possible damage to other, communities in whatever way.
Yeah.
Now, another domain, can I add one more?
Yeah. One short one.
No, sorry, but this is really important.
Yeah.
And that is the new heritage that is created out of war and that is created out of disaster. And the desire to commemorate, desire to know where your dead people are and what happens to them, the importance of commemoration is extremely, so there's new heritage coming out of these areas.
Yeah.
And I remember so well in 2004, and fortunately those days are gone. After the tsunami, I was in Sri Lanka. And the humanitarians were all about, life-saving, putting people in shelter and all those kinds, which is important, of course. But people were saying, we don't know where the dead are.
Yeah.
We're actually walking over the dead. And then there was this little initiative to build something where people can go to commemorate the dead, to put a candle, to whatever. But the humanitarians were just too busy with handing out this, handing out, to take that into account.
Yeah.
And that is a basic need too, especially when something like this happens. It's a basic need that you are given space for your rituals, for your commemorations. And I think it's definitely also something that humanitarians should take into account.
Yeah. Thank you, Thea. Great. We have to wrap up the conversation, but I'm really want to have a short final reflection on this for both of you, Marek and Tamar.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's very important to remember that more often than not, cultural heritage and in particular monuments, but also intangible heritage is deliberately targeted during the conflict. And actually attacks, vandalization of some monuments is traditionally one of the early warning indicators of approaching tensions, conflicts, especially with inter-ethnic background. Why it is so? Because it is seen as a kind of symbol linking identity to a specific place. And heritage is, for example, attacked or looted for not only for personal benefits in times of kind of legal vacuum created by conflicts, but also systematically destroyed in order to prevent, for example, return of displaced or expelled population. Yes. So this kind of radical exclusion of this heritage, eradication of this heritage, is very often perceived by conflict parties as a kind of symbolic victory.
Yeah.
Yes, we eliminated any traces of the presence of the other group, community, or state, especially in case of contested territory. So this is one thing that is important to remember when we speak about prevention of conflicts, both internal conflicts and interstate conflicts. That this element of cultural identity is very often one of the primary targets. Second point I would like to make is also the efforts of international community are more and more focused actually on cultural heritage as on one hand a potential conflict driver, on the other hand a kind of vector of conflict resolution, or even potential element of reconciliation after the conflict. And I can go back to, let's say, beginning of OEC in the 90s, so-called Krakow document on cultural heritage in Europe of 91. Then some documents of Council of Europe also in this respect, establishing this connection between conflict prevention and protection of cultural heritage, and also European Union, especially in its, let's say, strategic perspective on crisis management and conflict management, is adopting, across the board. So using also CSDP civilian missions in order to tackle the problem. For example, a very good example is Iraq, where EU mission is dealing with the looting of ancient cultural sites by not only organized criminal groups, but also by some, let's say, conflict parties that are trying to, let's say, consolidate their presence, cultural dominance in certain areas. So final point, I think we won't be able to successfully resolve such protracted, long-lasting conflicts, including this one in Georgia, unfortunately, without taking into account those cultural aspects, including tangible and intangible elements of cultural heritage, and addressing also certain elements of inter-ethnic cultural dialogue and exchange. Very often, this cross-cultural, cross-ethnic elements are quite easy to be forgotten or eliminated.
Yeah.
But it is essential to bring them back to the awareness of the population on both sides of dividing line, that there used to exist, there used to be a kind of common cultural heritage that united those communities, that allowed them to coexist sometimes for many centuries. And I think here such non-governmental organizations, elements of civil society, like Cultural Emergency or Blue Shield in Georgia, I know very well from my time in Georgia, your activities, they constitute a kind of essential element of those activities, because sometimes such issues, such daily issues as you mentioned, of elements of normal life, they disappear from the radar of big international intergovernmental actors.
Thank you, Marek, for making those points and underlining that.
With the connection of cultural heritage with resilience, we saw this every time after we had conversations with this displaced people, whether it was one-on-one or in focus group setting. Every time we would talk about their heritage, and it would of course bring up this fond memories that they had and nostalgia. And every time it invoked the missing of their homes, and every time they would say oh, when we go back. And they said that when we go back and when we build our homes from scratch, because we've done it once and we can do it again, and they're absolutely sure in it. And we say, yeah, when you go back, we'll be the first one to visit you and see you perform all these rituals with you, and we'll be by your side. So I think it's important to see that even thinking about this makes them hope more. And this hope in them is still alive, and it's very inspirational to see that. And we also got infected with this as well. And there are little kids running around like 5-6-year-olds in the homes that we visited, and you stop them, you ask them, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Gehui, and this is the occupied village that doesn't exist anymore. But these little kids still have the identity of being from there. And there's a lot of hope, and it's connected very, very tightly to their heritage. And we hope for the better future and better days for these communities.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamar. We with you, I think. And what is beautiful to see, actually, and that's also what you said, is how we're actively trying to place culture again central to the conversations that are being had, because it's very often that culture is forgotten at large in situations like this. But as you said, you mentioned the disaster cycle before. I think you also pointed out that it comes back in every single element of it, in conflict prevention, in response, as we heard Thea talking about, but also definitely after in peace building and reconciliation. So that means we have a lot of work to do together. Exactly. And that's actually what was the intention of this event, is that it's the start of a conversation, because we understand that there's a lot of different things to explore. There's a lot of different things we still have to learn about actors that are relevant in these crisis situations, but also how we can work better together, because that in the end for us is also a question that we ask ourselves, and all with the intention, of course, to better work with our partners and on the ground and the people of the affected community. So with that, that's the end of the conversation, but also the official launch of our Making the Case program, which is actually exactly a commitment to this. It's a long-term commitment to keep asking ourselves as cultural emergency response these questions, to keep working with partners on the ground like Tamar, to finding solutions and moving the field forward, but most of all, a commitment to advocate and campaign for the urgency and importance of cultural protection in crisis situations. So with this, Vera, we can launch.
What makes you, you? Is it your grandmother's recipe? Your favorite museum? Or the pride you feel when someone asks where you come from? Cultural heritage is the result of a community and a life being led. Who would we be without it? When our culture is under threat, our identity is at risk. To save culture means to save who you are. We make the case for cultural heritage protection in crisis situations. Support Cultural Emergency Response.